Welcome to Musical Minds and Missions, MCubed. I'm your host, Sarah Cahill. MCubed is brought to you by Phenotypic Recordings, a media company that brings to light new music by world-class musicians and innovative composers, with a focus on music that highlights the most important issues facing the world in our time. Today I'm talking with the W4RP Trio and vocalist LiKWUiD. Josh Henderson, Mikhael Darmanie, J.Y. Lee, and Rick Martinez, and LiKWUiD with their amazing new album, Sermon of the MatriarK, just out on Phenotypic. It's great to be talking with you today. Josh, maybe you can talk a little bit about being a classically trained musician and then going in this other direction. And I think so many of us, we get classical training, we're used to reading notes on the page and have a particular career path in mind, right? But you do that, and the members of your group do that. Like, you also play concertos with orchestras, and you play string quartets, and you play in other ensembles. So tell me about the impulse to go in this whole different direction and not do just the Bach partitas.
Yeah, we all went to school for classical stuff. Just practice some Bach partitas seconds before logging onto this stuff. So that's a very big part of our lives, our training, and our kind of day to day as well. But I think we're all we're just lovers of music and of life itself and art and all the wonderful things that are on the planet. A diversity of not just repertoire, but like styles and stuff like that leads you to a diversity of friends, diversity of experiences, and just not seeing the world from just one particular vantage point. Because no matter what you do, if you're kind of pigeonholed in something in your day to day, it's just like the same old. We can see this on the national, global scale with people who only are looking at things from one kind of perspective, only talking to one type of person. This is from wherever, only, eating one kind of food. It's like you're doing yourself a disservice, and I think everyone else too. There's so many wonderful things to experience. So I think musically, we love to do that, and then that just bleeds out into everything else in our lives.
Yeah, we're going to listen to one track from your album, Sermon of the MatriarK, on Phenotypic Recordings. So it's called Up, and Josh, you wrote this. The album is about Black matriarchy. And you chose the idea of the whistle walk for this piece. And I have to say that among everything else with this album, you're, I think, educating a lot of us in the audience, because I had never heard of the whistle walk before. So maybe explain that a little bit before we listen.
Totally, yeah. So the whistle walk, something I never learned about either, even growing up mainly in the South. But it was a practice where the slave women, in the pre-Civil War South, would cook the food for their white masters and the families associated. They had to whistle between traveling from the kitchen in the slave quarters to the white folks' home in order to signify that they were not tasting or stealing the food that they had just cooked. So such a wonderful thing like whistling, which was to me a joyous experience, and something I feel like people have images of a beautiful day like it is today in New York City, just walking down the street, skipping, whistling, having a good time. And it's like so unfortunate that such a really natural and happy thing can be used as a means of suppression. So the idea with the whistling in Up is that the kind of reclaiming of that practice, it's not a super widely known thing, but just, it's good to revisit these tragic and terrible kind of practices from days past, so that we don't, hopefully, I'm a big history person, and I'm really interested in the study of how it can better our present day. So, reliving these stories and these tales, just reminding ourselves how sometimes deplorable we can be as humans is good for uplifting and hopefully not going down such paths again.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's listen to Up with the W4RP Trio from Sermon of the MatriarK. that was part of Up from the album by the W4RP Trio with LiKWUiD, Sermon of the MatriarK. It's just out on Phenotypic Recordings. And it's a pleasure to talk to all of you today on this podcast. Josh, whistling is so interesting because some people can do it and some people can't. Have you always been really, really good at it?
Oh, yeah. I don't think I'm particularly talented at whistling, which is why I thought it's a nice kind of thing in the set, live. We kind of get the audience involved and try to also, the whole thing's about just like a communal type of experience that we can all get down on. We do some other experimenting with folks who can't necessarily whistle. We can just blow air into the space. But yeah, it's something I like doing, even like teaching just for singing melodies or whatever. But it's one of those things, like I'm not a great singer, but I like to sing. And I think the same thing with anything, dancing, acting, this messing around. Like you don't have to be Diaghilev or somebody, but you can experience these wonderful artistic things as that's like why they are there, so we can do them and have a good time doing them.
Yeah,
maybe together, maybe by ourselves, to think about things and yeah.
Yeah, let me ask you all about the idea of this album about Black matriarchy. And I understand that LiKWUiD, you've all been friends for a long time. Who came up with the idea of doing an album about Black matriarchy?
It wasn't my idea. I mean, the guys, I think, had been ideating a while to, well, no, it goes back because we've been kind of collectively doing some stuff over time, but it was essentially a chat that I had with Josh and Mikhael, and just from the basis and the foundation of what we discussed on those calls, I guess like just so much grew from like the seed that was planted, like starting with Black matriarchy, but also how does that look not only internally, but externally as we look at the diaspora? How does that look as we reflect on today, social justice, but also how does it look metaphorically? Also, what can we play on, right? The idea of Black girl magic and how that can be also a superpower. I'm going to use the term Achilles heel, but it's loosely based on a quote. I think Jesse Williams said this quote a while ago in a thank you speech, but just because we are magic doesn't mean we aren't real. So it's this dichotomy in existing as a Black woman. It's like you have this belief that you are strong and a superpower beyond measure, which is true, but also it takes away the vulnerability and the human aspect of it. Like, hey, I have feelings, I'm a person. And that spreads off into many different tentacles. Like if we think about Black mothers in maternity wards and how they're expected to be able to take more pain, and there's connotations that come with it. So, and then further into thinking of it in the mystical realm, but also a historical realm. Like, was it Mikhael? I think Mikhael and I had a conversation about the Dahomey warriors and the women armies, which was which was the basis for the movie Woman King that starred Viola Davis, and the history behind women armies and women warriors. So there was a lot going. I know I'm just like kind of throwing out flashcards, but there was a lot to build out once, the guys told me the basis for MatriarK and what that means. So it was fun to go to so many different places. And I think that kind of came out too, like stylistically as well. And that's from the spoken word to the rap battle in Devil Went Down, but yeah.
Yeah,
I left
all
out
of
something.
that you do so eloquently on this album. Like it really all comes through so beautifully in your words and in the performances. It's really incredible. And I love also that you honor not only, famous Black women, but your mothers and your grandmothers and your aunts and your personal heroes in your families, which is so important, and the women who hold the families together and sort of provide an anchor. And also, honoring women like Audre Lorde, who is such a great hero for her total honesty and how she never flinched from anything and was such a truth teller. So I think the album really has so many different layers and levels of meaning in that way. We're going to listen to one of the tracks that you're in. It's called Here's One. And you're talking here about violence against women, especially Masa Amini in Iran, and also women and girls in the Congo and in Sudan, and also here in America. Is that right?
Yeah. The thread of, I guess, in thinking of mothers and in thinking of matriarchy, sometimes you forget, like, before you get to that point, you're just a girl. Like, my sister recently posted this video of my mom, and we were celebrating her 74th birthday. And, she flashed back to some photos from when my mom was in high school and college. And, like, seeing my mom now, like, when you're a kid, your parents are like, oh, they're just old. And it's like, she's like 17, 22 in these pictures. I'm like, oh, she's just a girl. She's just figuring it out in the world. And no matter your ethnicity, race, upbringing, unfortunately for girls, there's just not safety everywhere. I mean, we experience that here in the States. We understand, like, there are very intricate and suppressive policies that claim to be set to either A, protect children, or B, somehow remedy women's health, yet there's no period equity. So it's like, do you really care about women's bodies, or are you trying to control women's bodies? Because, we would see legislation that would speak towards period equity instead of just policing our bodies and policing us. And those stories that connect us all, again, just as women, span across nations and across languages. So I felt like that was part of it. And just even as a Black woman, I've just learned intrinsically, and this is kind of to quote the Kambai River tribe, in order for everyone to be free, like, there's certain groups of people that will ultimately be free, and then we'll know everyone is free. And especially through the lens of queer Black feminism, if we look at it that way. But to say that I understand that, like, my position to amplify the stories of those that can't amplify it for themselves stretches beyond my race, stretches beyond my gender too, And if you look at it in that sense, like, Black matriarchy and matriarchy in general is still connected to women in other countries. And that includes women of all races and colors. And it was important to speak on that as well. I thought, sometimes we just have to be open to the stories that connect us as humans. And, like, protecting girls all over is something that's embedded in the message of the music too. So it was important to point that out also.
Let's listen to it.
Gotta crawl for you walk for you drive. And if you get lucky, might learn how to fly. High, keep your head to the sky, baby. Sis, you a queen if they ever ask why. I don't deserve all of your good. I know I don't serve you like I should. So many things ain't where they supposed to be, but I'm grateful you keep being good to me. Can I get a witness? At the very least, can I kick it? Yes, I can. Yes, I am. Keep your faith in God. Can't put it in there. Stop blaming God for your religion. Get off your knees, stand up and pay attention. Bismillah, say amen, say amen. God was just fine without the meddling of men. Morality police where your humanity be. Mama pray for peace, but she better than me. I stopped praying for my enemies. Man, I wish I had a wood on a shooting star, sending y'all to Hades. When they go low, aim high. Heaven lies within, stop relying on the sky. When they go low, aim high, 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 high. with my chest, don't mumble. Woman can't stop telling girls to be humble. Mansplain, mansplain, country to country, saying the same thing. You just another pig on the farm. Hands off my body and off my job. FTP, DTP, till I die.
Here's one with LiKWUiD and the W4RP Trio from their new album called Sermon of the MatriarK. It's really, really powerful. What's going on? First of all, I have to ask you, like, the old kind of 78 recording thing going on at the beginning and end, when you have that kind of artifact of scratchy vinyl recordings. I want to ask you about that, but also what's going on instrumentally in that piece.
The instrumental portion, is from the actual Negro spiritual Here's One, that, it's coming from slave tradition, but, I feel that does echo a lot of other cultures, even just like from a music theory standpoint, just the kind of the kind of pentatonic-y type of vibe, like the theme, it's very similar to many, many, many kind of folk traditions like around the world. But that's a specific source of the instrumental material there.
Yeah. Mikhael, I'd like to bring you into the conversation and ask you about working with LiKWUiD, how you work together, because what comes first? How is this work composed? Is there improvisation? How do you work with LiKWUiD in terms of what comes first?
Well, because of LiKWUiD, of phase flexibility, text can come first, or we give her this strange piece of music that doesn't fit any conventions in, 16-bar hip-hop practices, and then we're like, oh, there's a massive accelerando, and you just have to time it out to be on this break at this time. And in the studio, it's there. We're like, how is this even possible? So there's a real exchange of, LiKWUID's just so talented that, always writing. So there's just a wealth of material that she can pull from. And sometimes they're so specific, like she has certain things in mind that we have to really map out and make sure we get these hits together, et cetera. Like the text informs the music, but there's been many times which is probably sometimes a more traditional way in hip hop, as a rapper hears the beat and was like, oh, I'm gonna fit this in. But we really try to make it challenging, not on purpose, just the nature of contemporary classical music, fusion and everything.
Yeah.
As you're very familiar with. And then to throw it at LiKWUiD, and there's no y'all want me to do what? It was actually interesting to see, our friend Steve Pretzman in the studio as well with Faye, this, genius, this really brilliant classical and jazz mind, and many other genres, but newer to hip hop, but also showing that these schools all inform each other. And it wasn't strange at all to have, somebody like Steve in the room, like everything, all the ideas were there and people were just open to experimentation, which is rare because time is money in the studio.
Yes, it is rare.
Yeah, and there's a lot of trust with LiKWUiD as well.
Tell me about your background, classical piano, Juilliard?
No, North Carolina, Schoolyard.
Studying with
Awadaji
and Pratt, and I think
studying with Awadaji in Cincinnati.
Gil Kalish also, but
Gil is still my mentor today.
Okay, yeah. So classical training, yes. But what took you in this other direction? How did you decide you wanted to go beyond that kind of classical training that a lot of us just think of one direction, right? We're in the conservatory and we think this is what I've got to do. I've got to play concertos with orchestras and I've got to form a chamber group and be a soloist and play Chopin. And what led you to go in other directions? Or did you always?
I never did. It was only until moving to New York that I really started. This was post grad school, post my master's. I was really strictly classical, and that I moved to New York. It was like, oh, I got to eat. I got to pay rent. I got to take these gigs. And it was like, no, I'm just joking. I mean, of course we have to do that, but that was not the sole impetus. It was more, why can one play LiKWuiD and Rachmaninoff, but then if I'm in a room with blues musicians vibing on 3 chords, I didn't feel like I could contribute. And I was like, there's some disconnect in my training. And nothing against anything of the past, but just the way that institutions kind of had certain pillars. Other pillars didn't talk to each other. Everybody was on their kind of high horse in the genre world. And I was like, oh, I love jazz music. I love hip hop. Why don't I see what the inner workings are? And why don't I try to, what is a bebop scale? And I was fortunate to have the right mentors, and also the trio. Like the trio was a very cool, because we all had similar kinds of, Josh had been playing bands forever, but we were not bebop improvisers to this extent, or like super avant-garde free improvisers. And the early stages of the trios where less things were at stake, it was more like it was a playground of creativity to say, I'm going to try. And we have 10 shows at different coffee shops and clubs and bars. So this didn't work. So improvisation, the practice room is the stage. It really has to be the stage. So the trio was a big thing for all of us to just grow in terms of, and continually to this day, like keep pushing ourselves to musical languages and genres and music technology, pedals and loopers and synthesizers and this and that. It's this kind of cool blank slate that we're fortunate to have made documentation of it now.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the technology, because that's something also we don't get as classical musicians. So you have to learn about that. And it's just wonderful that you found each other and could collaborate on all of this. And of course, it's a completely different sound world than we're used to as classical musicians. JY, tell me about how you got involved and what that process was like for you, from being a classical cellist and expanding on that and sort of finding different techniques and technology to expand your sound work.
I think Mikhael just spoke for all of us, really, and I would probably repeat the same thing as Mikhael said, but it was like, I learned a lot from the trio guys. Of course, my background is, with most of us, is back in the classical world, and I was pretty serious doing that. I'm still very serious, loving doing, gigs that are related to, that and other genres, but really the trio has become a mostly playground, as Mikhael said, and not only musically, but also, when I was in school, like when I was in conservatory, I always questioned myself, okay, there's going to be hundreds and hundreds of these fellow peers and students graduating, and where are we going with this study that we, education that we just got? And that always questioned me into like, how can we else like self-sustain in a way, do our own music and find our own gigs? And as a cellist, I just like what Mikhael said, I wanted to explore other possibilities that cello can do. And Josh and I grew up together when we were little kids, and we were playing string quartet. This was back in Nashville, Tennessee, and then we both end up in New York for college, and that's when we met. Mikhael, Rick, and LiKWUiD, all of us got together then, and we thought, hey, why not create our own music and try to take it on the road? Right, the first few years, it was really tough. We barely made, zero at the end of the day. We were losing money. But Josh can probably elaborate more on this. But, we knew we were going to lose money in order to, get our music out there. And it was a dream to even get by, for me personally, with your question.
All important and valuable. And Rick, how did you get involved as percussionist and drummer? It adds so much to the sound, but like there's something about hearing you play drums that it's like, wow, this is really different.
Oh, well,
Different.
thank you.
How did you get involved with the group?
I've actually known Josh for a number of years before this group got together, and we actually did a similar Warp-esque ensemble, but a little more leaning towards the jazz side of things. So I went to school in New York for jazz, and two of my other buddies and Josh were doing this very niche project that it was tough. Like JY was saying, it's hard to get gigs that present this kind of orchestration live. It's great and it sounds great, but I feel like the sauce maybe wasn't quite the right mixture of things. And I love that group. I love those guys. They're incredible musicians. But then I remember our first rehearsal for our first gig with Warp specifically. And I think it was pretty much the first time I ever met Kel. I just remember sitting in the room, and it was one of these really cheap, dingy practice studios. And we're all sitting there, we're going over some new music. And as soon as these notes started hitting the air, I was blown away. I knew there was something special, and that right mixture of spices and all kinds of things were just marrying so well together, and I knew there was something special. So also growing up and playing more of the jazz side of things, I was really blown away by how JY and Mikhael and Josh can improvise, and they're so open. It's kind of rare you see classical musicians who just don't even look back at these standard practices. Hey, I'm open to anything that you throw at me. And that's what makes it so beautiful to play with these guys. And I think same with LiKWUiD, when we're working with her, it's just a conversation. It's a message, it's something that we're all trying to contribute to, rather than, oh, I'm stuck in this world, this genre, or this thing that maybe society wants us to sound like, and we're just more focused on hey, this is something that speaks to me. We want to put this on a record. We want to play this live. How are we going to translate that with our instruments? And whatever kind of comes out is, that's just us. When I'm playing drums specifically with the group, I'm always trying to support that, whatever that is, and also trying to bring my own influences into the group. So, and the guys are always open to it. And that's what makes it so great to play, because the trust is there and they're always so supportive, and I'm very grateful, very lucky to be playing alongside these guys and Faye, of course.
Yeah. And it's wonderful also to have those resources at your disposal and the technique. And like Mikhael, sometimes you play these incredible piano solos, which refer back to classical music. And I think in the same way that Nina Simone, you hear her break into a Bach fugue or something, right? Because she was a classically trained pianist. So that's very powerful to have all those reference points. Yeah, LiKWUiD, do you want to talk a little bit more about the concept of the album and how you as a group and you yourself came up with the concept of the Sermon of the Matriarch?
Oh, wow. Yeah, we can dig into that even a bit more. Out of everything, first of all, I ditto everything that the guys were saying. I have to say, playing with Warp is I think JY kind of alludes to this. It's I feel like I'm the fifth. I think I say that in one of the verses. We form something I was playing with. I feel like I could be the honorary fifth of the trio, since we're going change the 4 to a 5 now. Just to kind of echo on that. I felt so safe writing for this record. And I would say, even not that I don't feel safe in my own music, but I guess free is also the word that I'm looking for. Lyric wise, with emceeing, and we have this quote that we say, rappers talk because they want to say something. MCs talk because they have something to say. And that's kind of the difference. And, it's all hip hop. Rap is what you do. Hip hop is what you live. It's a culture. But my roots go back to gospel, Southern soul, like MatriarK lifestyle was a full lifestyle for me. Like I grew up in the church. My mother was a woman who we went to church every single day. I played on the church basketball team. That's how much we were in church. Like, you know, Wednesday nights, Friday night watch service, all of the services. So it felt at home, like to go from hip hop to gospel or to have those various riffs of the blues and jazz, like all of those things just felt at home for me. So the material and being able to feel empowered to speak freely and speak honestly and not have to worry about, I guess, the confines of being the complaining artist or the angry Black woman or whatever, you know, titles that folks sometimes put on artists that are just speaking what their truth is. I felt very safe to do that here. And the music was honestly the foundation for that. Like even opening up with the prelude to Testify to After the Rainbow, it feels like a sermon in itself, but it's also a journey or a trajectory, right? For womanhood, what it means to be a Black woman, like feeling all those different portions of emotions, but it's also not just a focus on struggle. There's also joy in there. And especially by the time you get to After the Rainbow, you know, which is, you know, obviously an homage, right, to Intijaka Shanje, what comes after all of that, you know, being free. And it kind of goes into almost a testimony at the end. And I said that to kind of revamp to my original point, like the timing of when this album came, I think also was perfect considering the climate in the US. Like it dropped on the 9th and it was like right before this election happened. And, you know, there were so many things happening. Like Massage Noir was making a new appearance with patriarchy and all the things that were occurring on a public stage on, you know, in the nation's greatest office or whatever. And a lot of the things that were addressed in this record were happening in real time to VP Harris. Like we got to see those conversations kind of unfold. It was like, and that wasn't planned. Like we didn't know when we were recording this because we were recording a lot of this 2024. Actually it was a year completely earlier, like that January 2024. So it was almost, I don't know how that worked out the way it did, but I think it was telling too that we were onto something and just wanting to make something that we could love up on ourselves with. And, you know, being able to show love to our mothers, to those that came before us, our femmes, is like your own, being able to reclaim yourself, reclaim your own time. You know, I'm a person who believes that sometimes you got to pay your own reparations. And this felt like sonically and musically what we were doing.
Mikhael, we're going to listen to a couple more tracks from this album from Gimme Dat. And this is really incredible and deep. So tell me about this. When you compose, do you just sit down and write the music? How much is open? How much is open to the other musicians improvising?
Well, it's funny. Josh writes a lot for the group, and he's a very, very specific composer in the classical sense of, okay, here's the big structure and here are the notes. And then, you know, we go off or whatever. But I'm such a perfectionist that I leave space open. I'm like, I can't control all this. So there's a lot of, with this particular one, there's a version that's fully notated and there's the warp version where Josh is just improvising JY's, Rick's just creating a part on the spot. But there is a version for, the premiere was not with the trio. It was a commission from the Schubert Club. So the Minnesota Orchestra and St. Paul people, you know, some of the most amazing classical players played it. And so I had to have a version that was, you know, written out for them. But
and you talk in the liner notes about not being able to find representations. This was a silent film, right? You were writing music for a silent film. You had trouble finding representations of Black joy, Black love, or Black peace in a silent film, which was made before 1926. So you chose The Great Train Robbery. Gimme Dat is a sort of like considered the album's antagonist, toxic patriarchy.
Well, I couldn't find Black joy, so let me find white on white violence. But it's almost an Easter egg that it works with the film, but I just wanted to write something that works as music and then smashed it into, oh, this can actually line up with, but it's mainly from the various kinds of acoustic feeding of, like, you feed in house music and then Detroit black house music or country southern jigs and some rock, some funk, some hip hop. But how does that, and this is probably one of the purely acoustic suites on the album. I think there's a lot of bass, Josh plays bass. I play a lot of synth. Rick plays a full drum kit with pads and samples, and JY has, so much the technology conversation. But I think this one was like one of the, I think, purely acoustic. So it was kind of like, how can all these these black dance forms fit into the confines of acoustic music and also the confines of this film. So it was this like subtractive kind of method of whittling away at stone or something.
So that's a few movements from Gimme Dat from the album Sermon of the MatriarK with the Warp Trio and LiKWUiD. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to M-Cubed from Phenotypic Recordings, co-founded by Michael Hostetler and Stephen Pretzman. The music you heard on today's show is available on Bandcamp and wherever music is streamed. There are links in the show notes. Today's program was produced by AJ Machado, and I'm your host, Sarah Cahill. Please follow or subscribe so you know whenever we post a new show. You can reach us at info@phenotypicrecordings.com, and we're always glad to hear from you.